Hey there, welcome to White Women Wake Up. I'm Jonelle.
And I'm Karen.
Each week, one of us brings a topic to the table, something we've been wrestling with, reading about, or noticing in our own lives.
And the other reacts in real time. No scripts, no prep, just an honest conversation between a mother and a daughter, spanning generations about what it means to wake up as white women in a world shaped by bias, power, and inherited patterns.
We don't always agree, and it's not always comfortable, but we show up anyways.
Let's wake
up.
Hi, Jonelle.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you? So reading that intro made me think of something that I haven't told you yet.
What?
But as you know, I've been traveling a lot lately, and so I've picked up a couple new podcast listeners, I hope.
Yoo-hoo.
I know. If you're out there, you know who you are. But it's been funny is every time I've gone to describe the podcast, I realize I'm literally saying the intro to them.
That's so funny.
I was like, each week one of us brings a topic. Like, I'm just like saying it. I was like, well, each week one of us brings like a topic to the table and, something. And I've just been like, oh,
hey,
my God,
that's good.
Literally
the elevator
the opening.
Speech.
It's just cracking me up.
Okay, we have to give true disclosure. We are recording this
right before
we're doing our book club.
So the episode will come out after the book club.
Yes. Yeah.
But technically the book club is this evening.
Yeah.
And so we don't know how it's gone yet.
Yes.
But we have high hopes.
We have high hopes.
That it's going well.
Yes.
But you'll hear an update next week.
Yes.
On how it went.
Friday. And also bingo is on Thursday, which you'll get on Friday.
You'll hear on Friday. We're recording
no more
that.
announcements. Although, and we haven't picked a date. So we will have another book club in March.
We have picked a date.
Have we picked a date?
It's always the second Tuesday.
Oh, yeah. Second Tuesday.
It's March 10th.
March 10th. Thank you.
And the book is The Poet X.
Poet X.
Clearly, we can see who's in charge of the book club.
You are
on our end.
You are our content team on this podcast.
Oh my gosh. I do audio, I do visual. If anyone out there wants to be a free intern,
we need you.
We would love it.
I know. It's been funny watching all the award ceremonies and podcasts, and their entire team comes out, and
they're like, thank you. And
we have Jonelle and Karen.
Well, actually, we're kind of like Taylor Swift. There was an interview with Taylor Swift talking, because she writes her own songs and stuff, and she was talking, I think it was Jimmy Fallon or Seth Meyers about it, and she was like, feels funny because I wanted to thank everyone who worked on the album, but it was me who wrote the songs. And so that's kind of cheekily, obviously she has producers and things like that. Yeah. But that's kind of like us. We're like, we would love to thank everyone who works in this podcast.
Yes.
Jonelle and Karen.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of content, unless, your story was really good. And I do have to say, I did reflect the white tears. I guess maybe I need to jump in.
They were minimal tears. I don't want to over-exaggerate this.
I need to jump in. The reason I have a hard time understanding the white tears is, and this true disclosure, I go to white anger. I go to anger, and I would not. I'm more bully and aggressive, which is really bad. So when I'm not getting my way and I'm acting entitled, I don't cry. I don't back down. I get bully aggressive. Yeah.
So, but you're uncomfortable by the tears.
Well, I guess I guess I'm always confused by the tears. Like, what is the purpose of the tears? But I'm sure it's to manipulate. Yeah.
Can I tell you what that might be a reflection of?
What?
Some internalized misogyny.
Oh.
Is that tears tend to be a feminine thing.
Oh.
And so tears, being disturbed by tears or frustrated by tears is internalized misogyny.
Interesting.
I'm
not embracing my feminine side.
No.
Yeah.
In fact, you're judging feminine. And I'm not to say that.
I was, because I said I'm curious by it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's still not a natural sense for you.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying white tears are a positive. That's all negative.
In that case, it's not positive.
But the fact that you're confused about tears.
Yeah. But thank you. I mean, you're right. It's so funny. One of the books I really want to recommend, and I've talked about it before, is this book, Sacred Instruction by Sherry Mitchell. And
it'll be on the book club.
It will
soon.
Be. Because she talks about, in us, we have the feminine, the masculine, and our colonialization doesn't always allow us to embrace both sides of ourselves that way.
Well,
so that's interesting.
While we're talking about tears.
Okay.
So while we're on the subject of crying, I, on the other hand,
my subject is kind of tears.
I, on the other hand, have like very minimal internalized misogyny because I cry at everything, and I'm very okay with it. People embracing their emotions. But the wedding I went to a couple weeks ago, it was for my friend, and he was marrying the love of his life, an amazing husband. They are the best cut. I mean, they are the epitome of they truly make each other better. And so it's so beautiful to watch. But my friend is not really emotional. He is, he just doesn't cry. He's not an emotional. In fact, there's also a story with Karen and him one time at another wedding making fun of his past boyfriend for crying during the wedding. So there's a lot of like, patriarchal views around not crying. But at this wedding, it was so beautiful because he kept crying. And there was one incident where he actually starts walking down the aisle. I'm in an aisle seat and I am bawling. Like I cry at weddings, but this was like beyond crying. And he looks at me as he walks down the aisle and just goes, "Stop it."
Yeah.
Stop it. Because he just didn't want to tear up. He was embarrassed by his tears. And it just, and again, it was such a sweet, sentimental moment. I've known him for so much, most of my life. And like, but he kept joking at the ceremony when everyone's like, "I can't believe you cried." And he like was like, "It was her fault." He kept pointing to me. He was like, "Jonelle made me cry," and stuff. And again, all out of sweetness. But it is still this interesting concept of like where we feel shame in these emotions. Like he's still, and not a ton of shame, but there's still a place in him that is like, why am I crying? And
this leads to my topic.
Oh, it does.
Perfectly.
Anyways, but that's on the crying note. It was beautiful. Everyone who's listening knows who you are.
Yeah.
And but
so I want to bring up the topic we brought up 2 weeks ago or a couple weeks ago about Renee Good and Alex Prouty dying in front of dying in a national space. And this idea of grief and this idea of, you talked about white grief. And I wanted to bring it up because we didn't really plan for it. We just kind of moved into it, which I think was really actually a really good idea because grief needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
But I think it was a good prelude for what we saw in the Black and the Brown community, their reaction.
Yes.
Because what many Black and Brown people said after Renee Good and Alex Prouty is not that they didn't empathize that they were killed at the hand of the government, but like, wow, now you're waking up, right? Now you're actually seeing how we feel.
Yeah.
And that you experience so live, right? So true, because that's exactly what they were saying, right? And you actually moved that kind of association. So you're seeing white people on TV getting shot at the hands of police. And it brought up such grief.
Yeah.
And it also brought up a reminder, like, if I'm feeling this way because this is my tribe, so to speak, imagine how Black people feel Black and Brown people feel all the time because they're used to it. So I wanted, we talk a lot about white grief.
Yes.
But we don't, it's a really unique, it's not like grieving it's emotional, but it's not. The term white in front of it is very different than grieving when your mother dies or someone dies or someone in your life. You feel grief. So what I want to talk about is white grief also encompasses guilt and shame.
Yes. Yeah, it does. But I actually quickly say, so this is going to be a really interesting episode.
Yeah.
Because it is not normal that you and I both come with information. So if anyone heard me typing quickly, it's because I was looking up, I actually just wrote a blog article on this. So I have a ton of information myself to share on this topic. So it'll be an interesting kind of like where we've taken perspectives. But I disagree a little bit that I agree that yes, it is mixed with shame. It is mixed with a lot of that.
Yeah.
But as I kind of started entangling this, because I agree, I thought white grief didn't feel like the right word at first either. But as I started entangling a lot of this, I see how grief still is the right word.
Yeah, the emotional response. It is the right word because even as you look up the language of white grief, they quickly want to move it to white guilt and white shame.
Yes.
And I think that's different. A mistake. I think that that's the mistake because I think if we look at the language of grief and we look at the experience of grieving, if we take that out of the descriptor, we're going to lose the gift that grieving gives us, right? So if we call it white guilt or white shame, and just that, which is part of that, but just that. So what I understand shame is we own it as something we don't have control over. I am shamed by. So we and holding shame, even though we feel shame, isn't something we want to hold on to. We want to acknowledge it and we want to move forward. The guilt is what is the identifier. So, I wrote some notes on this and help me. But the guilt, it is like it opens the door, while grief is the room where we get to do the real work, if that makes sense. So at first, you were grieving, and you were grieving kind of from an empathetic way. Then you actually moved into spaces of guilt because you realized, oh my gosh, this happens.
But that was part of what white grief is. This is where I'm saying it's disconnect. I don't think it's a moving spaces. I think it's what I've come to understand the grief part is the difference of like a shame and what is the other one?
And guilt.
And guilt. Thank you. Shame and guilt is those can desensitize us. What I've learned about grief, and this is grief is not, you're not desensitized to it. And that was the difference of what realizing, like BIPOC people are not desensitized to their community.
Yeah, they're feeling real grief.
In the same way that white people continue to get desensitized by all of this violence that they see that is outside their community kind of thing. The grief happens when there's that personal connection there. But then I agree with you. On top of white grief, we get shame, we get things, but I think those are not stages. Well, they're added on.
Well, I think what's so important,
but I don't know.
This is what you said. You use the language desensitized, because I think that is really true. When we feel the shame or the guilt, if we go into the grief, or the grief is first, whichever, comes first, that pain is so real, we don't always want to stay. And one of the things, like you had mentioned in that article that you wrote, that because it's this white grief, because it's that, we can go in and out of it. We don't have to stay in it. We can run from grief. Grief is hard.
I disagree.
Grief is hard work. You don't think so?
That's not what I was saying in my article.
Okay.
That was my talk on privilege.
Yeah.
That was my talk on how we can desensitize ourselves to still feel like we have empathy.
Yeah.
But desensitize ourselves to everything's going on.
Yes.
I think grief doesn't allow us to desensitize ourselves because it puts us in that perspective.
Yeah. So I guess
that's what I'm saying.
You're right. Let me be clear. We distract ourselves so we don't have to go into grief.
Yes.
Because it is so painful.
That is different. Yes.
Yeah, we distract ourselves.
Grief, I don't think you can be desensitized from it.
So I'm going to share a story about a moment that I felt white grief, and maybe that'll illustrate it well for me.
Yeah.
So we were doing a hiring position in my department, and we were interviewing a Black woman from, where was she from? Isn't that terrible? I don't think she was Somalian. I cannot, anyways, from South Africa, from Africa. Yeah.
Okay.
I know,
a lot of
right
wrong
there. Isn't that
in
wrong?
That sentence.
Anyways, because I work for a religious institution, we have to talk about our Christianity. And this was before I was aware and I had opened myself up to a lot of dialogue. She had said, well, my Bible is not your Bible. And I was at first like, what? What does she mean by that? She goes, I can't ascribe to a master-slave Bible. Your
Good
Bible
for her.
is all about a master-slave relationship and the sharing and emphasizing that colonial mindset of master-slave. Whereas she started talking about her biblical narrative being much more generous with love. I remember after the interview going home devastated, like really sad. What does she mean? My Bible is not like her
That's
Bible.
Not white grief.
Oh, I was so in grief about, and then I felt bad, like, wait, my Bible, this Bible that I had aligned myself with, brought her so much pain.
So that's called white pain. So there's an actual definition for white grief.
Okay.
So white grief specifically is that's not white grief. That's all you're talking about. So this makes sense. This is what you're talking about with the white pain, the shame, the discomfort, the guilt.
Smart. Yeah.
I'm not smart. I just did a whole blog article. I just did a research.
Okay.
On
so
this.
Go on. So my white pain.
So white grief.
Yeah.
So that's your white pain.
Yeah.
That is and I can see how we bring it into grief because in a sense you're grieving your history.
Well, I was grieving my history. I was grieving my misinterpretation.
Yes.
I was
so that's a different, that's like identity grieving.
I was grieving how I was complicit in a narrative that I felt so strongly about that I was
That's identity grief.
Okay.
That's not white grief.
I
That's
did not
identity
interrogate the text.
Yeah, so that's identity grief. And so identity grief, I've had this experience before too, is I went to a Christian college and I had a great experience there, but they are a very conservative college. It's in Texas. It's in, and so I've had some of that identity grief around my life experience kind of thing. And it doesn't take away from my life or the people I loved and who I was close with at those times. But there is this grief of, wow, who was I and what, and how did that shape me and all of those. So that's identity grief there. We've talked a lot about with some of the men in our life around how they hate, hearing white men or this and that because they're tied to that identity. And so that's their identity grief.
Yeah.
White grief specifically is around violence. And the grief that you see when someone in your own identity, white, is experienced violence against them. Especially
okay.
And so
so
white grief.
This is not something I had researched.
No.
So you really I thought I did, but and again maybe I understood it. So you the grief that I was feeling. And so let me go back to what I was talking about, and then we're going to let you unpack this differently, is the grief that I was feeling was definitely, I was shameful. I felt shame that I was complicit. I felt shame that I hadn't done more research on my biblical narrative, the things that I were ascribing to, because I believe that I believe in a very generous Christianity. I don't believe in an exclusive Christianity. And then also guilt.
Yeah.
And then I was so sad. I thought that was grief. So, but it was my identity.
Grief.
My identity had been tied up into something that I don't actually even identify with.
To. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that's more identity grief. And that's
it did move me by sitting in that grief, by staying uncomfortably comfortable in that grief, by letting me be myself stay uncomfortable. It did move me into doing more work in diverse points of view, in my own inherited biases.
Yeah. And so that is identity grief. And when you, like everything we explained to, and again, white grief can be tied into that, but white grief is really specifically around targeted violence. So here's the definition that I've found is white grief is not the same as white pain or identity grief. It is not the same as racialized trauma. It is not the evidence that we finally get it. White grief is a specific emotional experience shaped by discomfort distance, by protection, and by a lifetime of not having to imagine ourselves or our children or our family as default targets of state violence.
Yeah.
So that's like the big distinction that matters is it shows up as grief. And so the research that I did talks a lot about the vicarious racial trauma of like, and so this is where I'm saying how the desensitization is because like we often assume people of color like us are just desensitizing to all this violence. And the statistics are, no, that's not true.
No.
White people can be desensitized to it, but Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, these images of violence are not isolated to them. They stack, they accumulate, and this is actually known to cause such ongoing psychological stress that it operates much like PTSD across these communities.
Well, and I can see it because one of the research I did is I think this is terrible to say, and please, now that we're doing a podcast, please don't make us a target.
Why we're here, we're vulnerable.
But I think in the many generations, so I've now lived 6 decades, everyone knows my life, I only know one person, like, and I didn't even know them. It was a cousin of a cousin of a cousin that was shot by a police.
Yeah.
So that I knew, like, the story. So in other words, there was one story in my family system that carried out by police brutality.
Yeah.
One. And this is exactly what you're saying is, so I looked up the statistic and about a third, so 1,100 and so people were killed by police officers. So I was looking, obviously, I looked up, federal agents or police. About 1,100 people were killed by police violence in 2024. Jeez. Out of that, you got about 25 or 30% were Black persons.
Yeah.
Now, why, you could say, oh, that's only 20 or 30%. The challenge with that is Black population is only 10%.
Yeah.
So Black people are 2 to 3 times more directly affected by seeing brutality, by seeing killing. I'm just talking killing from police and seeing that within their story.
Yeah.
So I can see what you're talking about then with this white
grief or racial grief.
Yeah.
I like when Renee Good happened, I realized that for the first time, I truly understood, like not intellectually understood like I always had, but I viscerally understood why violence against someone who looks like me can just attach to your nervous system.
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't take away my empathy that I've always had, but it makes me understand how isolated my empathy was before.
Yeah.
And how my subconscious still gears towards these inherited biases. And just so much work there's still to be done there. But that's the...
So, and I did want to talk about this language of grief. So like whether it's identity grief then, or white pain, or
racial
grief. One of the things that I think we're doing a disservice to ourselves is, and I get it, I don't want to grieve. I hate grieving. Grieving is really difficult. No, it's just pain.
Well, it's awful.
It's awful. We know
for
that.
Listeners, we had a couple tough years of a lot of deaths in a row, like
family deaths,
but like just an ridiculous amount,
and pets,
but friends, really close friends, like just pets, friends, family members. There was a lot of grief in a short period of time, and we learned the just never-ending depth and cycle of pain that at one point we did run. You and I booked a trip to Tokyo. We left within a week after booking the trip because we just needed to run.
Yeah. So the thing is, I get why we don't want to be in grief.
Yeah.
I get it. This is not a judgment. This is not to shame anyone. This is more of an invitation.
Yeah.
Because when we get into that space, like you were, and fortunately, you had also been doing the work and you were able to observe what was happening, and it opened up a dialogue of internal reflection.
Oh, it did. And it was so shocking.
Yeah, it was shocking. But it's so funny because even Saturday Night Live a couple of weeks ago did an episode on, when everyone was talking about Minnesota and so forth and these deaths, which are horrible.
Yeah.
No one is diminishing it. But the Black newscasters were like,
Yeah. They're like now this never happens to people. And they were like, oh, yeah, sure.
Now you're listening.
Yeah.
So anyways, the thing is, we need to find a way when we feel that guilt, when we feel that shame, when we feel those spaces, and to invite ourselves into this grief. Maybe we need to think about the way that, other cultures, did a crying room.
Yeah.
Or other cultures moved in with community when they were experiencing grief. But we have to have those spaces. What are you doing? What are you laughing about?
Yes. And so I think different types of grief. I think when it comes to racial grief, though, that only centers us. It centers, again, it's kind of like the SNL skit that you're talking about.
Yeah.
We have this grief over what's happened in Minnesota. Just let me finish.
Yeah.
And so the grief starts to become, we're waking up to the normalization of this.
Yeah, the systemic injustice.
So, but by grieving that in the way that you're speaking about, again, centers us into the idea that this hasn't been happening.
No,
people.
Then I'm glad you clarified that. No, what I'm talking about grieving is this space where you realized, oh my gosh, this is what Black families, brown families, people who are on the margins have felt for a long time.
But you were speaking of having sitting circles of grief.
If you need to,
But I disagree with that. I don't think we need white sitting circles of grief.
Well, I don't think Black people want to hold our grief.
No, but that's my point is,
So
I don't think we need, I think the grief needs to turn into conversations.
Yeah.
It needs to turn into, again, otherwise, we're just centering white comfort again.
Yeah.
We're centering grief is...
Well, I'm not saying the goal is for comfort. I'm saying the goal is to move us to a space of heartfelt empathy, real. So, for example,
but I think so often...
Because, let me finish. I think because you knew... Because you started looking at it like, oh, this is what Black people feel all the time. That's exactly the language that I heard it loud and clear that day or the next day that Black people were like, absolutely.
Yeah.
We are not in the space of holding your grief. We've had our grief.
Yeah.
So what do you suggest someone should do?
But that's what I'm saying, though, is
how did you stay in your grief then? What did you do with your
I didn't stay in my grief. That's my point, is I don't think we should stay in our grief. I think staying in our grief centers the whiteness, centers,
Okay, but you
move your awareness.
But
I
think
process my grief.
Okay, you process.
I think staying in anything negative is unhealthy.
Yeah.
I think...
So how did you process your grief?
Well, I talked about this
Okay, then maybe my wording is different.
It happened. I acknowledged it. I reflected on it whoa, why am I feeling this way? Where did this come from?
Did you get the sense that you wanted to cry or wail the way someone, did you allow it to go deep enough?
No, mine went to fear. Mine went to fear, and the grief. Okay. I guess, how should I explain this in the sense that, and maybe this is the two distinct, the separation of this is white grief. It shouldn't. It's not a space that you should stay in. It's not a space. It's a space to create awareness.
Yeah,
that uncomfortability needs to create awareness.
Okay, the problem is we jump out of it so fast we don't get to awareness.
I disagree. I think white people sit in. I was going to say a bad word. I think white people will sit in their crap and their pity potty for too long and too much.
But the thing is,
and it leads to avoidance. I completely disagree.
But don't you think that? Okay, I'm just thinking about this space of, and maybe I like grief. Maybe, I don't know. I don't see grief as a bad thing the way you see it. I see grief.
I don't think grief is a bad thing.
Maybe the word is.
I think the thing is, okay, I think what you did.
Because
let's go back to your story about identity grief.
Okay, wait.
Let's go back to your story about identity grief. I think that was a great natural reaction of you reflected on yourself. You had sadness, you had shame, you had guilt. You had a lot of emotions
and
around
the thing
things.
is, and I did feel grief because one of the things I do know now that is a symptom of grief is you might feel like you're feeling better and then it envelops you again later on. And so all of a sudden I was able to re-enter a room with people and then I felt really sad again.
But as we've talked about, that is like, there's duality in these complexities. It's like you can sit and still have grief and still have sadness and still have those waves, but I'm not asking you to sit in that. And I think that's what you're doing, is asking to sit. And I think so often when we allow people to sit in stuff, it's what creates But
I think here's the challenge.
I don't know.
Okay, and I don't know if we might agree to disagree on this one.
It sounds like
because I think sometimes when we don't spend the time reflecting, and maybe the word is reflecting, hang on.
I agree. Reflection needs to happen.
Yeah. And maybe that's the better word, the word that you're looking for. But a
crying circle to me is not a time of reflection. A crying circle to me is centering whiteness in this conversation.
So
that's what I'm reacting to, is your interpretation of, should we have grief like a crying circle?
Anyways, whatever that may look like, and I don't know, I'm going to do more research, because one of the things that you're looking at, like reading about different cultures, is these kind of ceremonial practices of transformation and change.
But for a person, again, I think we need to separate different types of grief.
But my point,
we need different types of reaction.
Okay, my point in this is, though, I don't think we should run so quickly to fix. And I think like white tears put us in that space of wanting to center it back on us and move straight to fixing it for us, because it's too painful for us to live.
I'm not saying to fix it for us.
Yeah.
I'm saying move forward to accountability.
Yeah.
Of what else is happening out there.
Yeah.
And
sometimes when we move forward, so
this is where we can agree. Yeah. I know I am a tend to jump into. I am not a sit and a wallow person. I am not a sit and
I'm a sit and meditative person.
And I do tend to jump and go forward. So I do agree there's probably a middle ground here.
Yeah.
I just think,
because the middle ground is self-learning.
I just think processing white grief or racial grief in the same way that we would process a person grief, like losing a person grief.
See, I think they're
two different ways to process.
Yeah.
And in my mind, and what I heard from you is, do we process them the same way? And I don't think we should.
Yeah, maybe we need to figure out a different way to process.
I think it's a very different way to process.
What I am afraid is, if we don't hold this grief in some way, I don't know what the answer is, we will run to fix it. We won't listen. We'll fix it based on our own account. We won't listen to the other, and we won't understand. Like, you gained a deeper sense of empathy because of that space.
Yeah.
That I think is actually really important for us to have the respective dialogues that we need to have. For us to have real transformation.
Totally. I'm not saying avoid.
So,
I don't think avoidance is right. I that's not at all. I think
you just don't want me to do some
a crying circle. Well, it's a crying circle. It makes no sense. It reminds me of, I don't know if we're far enough out that I don't think these people will listen to the podcast anymore. But we had listeners listen to the podcast, and they reached out to me about this, like, white women empowerment.
Oh yeah, you
semiotic.
Talked about that.
Did I talk about this?
Yeah, you did.
And it was, and I should have read the description better, but it was like literally a place for white women tears.
Okay, so what? Okay,
and
we don't need to go long into that. What I'm hearing from you is, again, we don't need to go back and center it on ourselves.
And we don't need to push
the reflection on how it will gain our empathy towards others. How does this emotion, this feeling allow us to have empathy towards others.
I completely agree with that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. You never know where it's going to take a turn.
No.
Thanks for joining us on White Women Wake Up. We hope today's conversation sparks something in you, whether it's reflection, a new question, or a deeper commitment to showing up with empathy and accountability. If you found this episode meaningful, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Please keep sharing it with someone who needs to hear it.
We don't have the answers.
We don't have the answers. Maybe we need another January goal or February goal now of sending it to 3 people who need to hear it. Please, please, please. You can also connect with us on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Substack, or whitewomenwakeup.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts and keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay curious, be open, and keep waking up.
Bye.
Bye.